Last year, when my son Miguel was in 8th grade, he hopped in the car after school one day and shared that they were able to ask the teacher anything during that day's sex ed lesson. The teacher highlighted one question to answer. The question was, which is better, oral or anal sex? It wasn't my question, he said. What did the teacher say? I asked. For some reason, the question was posed to the language arts instructor, not the science one, who teaches the unit. She said, that's a personal question. He wrestled his backpack to the front passenger seat floor for a few moments, then asked, so which is better? There are moments all parents remember. When our kids first walked, lost a tooth, strung a sentence together. The complete sensory who, what, where, why, when details remain etched in our memories. And then there are other moments when all we can do to prevent our gaping maw from plunging to the ground while our convulsing bodies explode in a paroxysm of terror when we are called to answer the questions. I staggered and started. I guess oral sex. I've never had anal sex. You've had oral sex?
Oh.
Yes. I wondered if I was caught in another TMI moment where I was sharing more than my adolescent son needed or wanted to know. Then again, he had asked, and many experts say keeping the lines of communication open is what really matters. With mom, he asked.
Oh.
At that point, I almost preferred the 1 or 2 word responses he usually offered when I inquired about a school day. More hesitation. Yes, with mom. Then for some strange reason I added, but she wasn't the first. Fortunately, he didn't want any more details. Not that I was trying to thump my chest, brag about notches on my fellatio belt, and pull my son into a locker room or just guys kind of conversation where we slap towels in each other's asses and fantasize about cheerleaders. I was a middle school teacher for 12 years, so I had taught sex ed. One year a student asked me during a class on Jewish attitudes toward homosexuality how men had sex. Instead of prefacing my response with, what do you think? I just told her. Later that day I called her parents and shared our classroom conversation. I feared she might tell them at dinner, guess what Mr. Friedman taught us in class today? Her mother, a nurse, was very understanding and laughed at her daughter's inquisitiveness. Another time when I was on recess duty, 2 second graders, about 7 years old, asked me where babies came from. This time I said, what do you think? One girl made a little steeple with her fingers, palms pressed together, and then pushed her forefingers back and forth, back and forth. And the daddy climbs on top of the mommy and they wrestle like this. Ooh, gross, said the other girl. You'll probably feel differently when you're 18, I said, before they moved on to something else on the playground. So teaching and talking about sex is not a problem for me, but it is different when it's your own child. It's one thing to have a clinical discussion with a group of someone else's children, but when it's my own son, and my wife and his mother is dead, the panic gnaws at my very core, because flying solo makes me even more frightened by the reality that my words truly matter. And if I screw up, I always knew I'd be Miguel's go-to guy for all matters of sex, relationships, love, etc. Verna happily ceded that responsibility to teach Miguel when he was a toddler, more than a dozen years ago by virtue of our shared gender. Hey, you're the guy, she basically said. Have fun. She might as well have said, I carried him for 9 months, breastfed him 3 to 5 times a night in our bed, while you slept soundly. So knock yourself out about sperm and eggs, penises and vaginas. And she'd have been right. He first asked me about where babies came from when he was 8. After I gave him a very brief introduction to sexual reproduction, he looked at me as if I'd forced him to swallow castor oil and raw eggs. From time to time, as he's approached puberty and adolescence, and his body has begun to change, there have been additional talks. I try to be as matter-of-fact as possible and share with him just the facts. But now that he's a teenager, with all the suspect hormones raging, and his interest in girls is starting to grow, I know we will talk about more than just facts. We need to discuss emotions, readiness, respect, protection, decision-making, peer pressure. And did I mention protection? Because he is sort of ready for something. Last spring, he actually kissed a girl during a game of Truth or Dare in an adult-deserted classroom at the church our neighbors had invited us to for Easter. When he found out that his father was handing out condoms tonight, he asked, in the slightly offensive manner that some Marin white boys have adopted to sound how they perceive as ghetto, if I could, quote, hook a brother up with some condoms. Then he splayed his hand in front of me and showed 5 fingers. Miguel, why do you need 5 condoms? I asked, trying to keep my curiosity from boiling over. You don't know what happens at school, he said, his body now prone across the couch. What does that mean? Could mean many things, he replied, and I was convinced he was toying with me. But what does that mean? I said, my voice rising steadily. I could be a condom dealer, he said. Then why did you need me to bring you lunch money today at school? I asked, even though he clearly wrote me in and was playing me for the fool I had allowed myself to become. Because I was all out of condoms, out of money. I'm raising a smartass, a serious smartass. I'm sure he wants to stuff some into his wallet and then share in teenage show and tell fashion in the courtyard of his high school. Sex ed, sex, questions, answers, condoms, oral sex, making love, making babies, protecting yourself and others. Sometimes it is overwhelming for me as I navigate through the thicket of parenting by myself, as we negotiate a common language of love and life. I might just capitulate and send my now 6-year-old daughter to a monastery before she reaches puberty. As for Miguel's request for 5 condoms, I gave him 1. Just 1. This ain't no party, no disco, no fooling around, and certainly no advertisement for potato chips, for you can and will only have 1, for now. Because in hipster parlance, bro, chill, I got you covered.